Okay, so I thought I'd record a short video just to walk through the process of shutting down, resetting, and then turning back on a FoxESS hybrid or AC grid-coupled inverter, grid-tied inverter. So first of all, this process is the same for nearly all solar and hybrid inverters. It's just knowing what to look for. Your installer should walk you through the process specifically for your property, where they're installing isolators, where they're installing additional circuit breakers. So make sure during install you stress that you need to understand how to isolate the system. So first of all, reasons for wanting to isolate the system. You may be having any work done on the electrical system of your house. You may wish to be expanding the battery capacity of your system. You may have a fault, and the first step of troubleshooting a fault for most of the error codes is actually to restart the system. And any other reason that you wish to shut down, reset, and then fire back up the hybrid inverter or the AC coupled inverter. So first of all, what you need to do is, if this inverter has solar, is you'll need to isolate the DC side. So what we'll do is I'll look over here. So what you're looking for on the DC or direct current, this is a gray with black handle box that is coming from your solar array. These should be fitted somewhere near the inverter that's easy to access, but I've seen installers hide them in lofts. I've seen sometimes they don't have them at all. But there will be a mechanism for isolating the solar panels that are on your roof. So look for one of these boxes. The other thing you can do on the hybrids, you'll notice on the bottom of the inverter, let me just circle here, you'll notice that there's this switch, and this switch you turn, it tells you which way to turn it, and it will make like a click, and you'll feel the spring tension that has inside of it. This switch is actually a DC isolator for the solar, and that's why some installers won't fit one, because they believe that the inverter already has one fitted. I preferred to have both, preferred to have a box like this, where the cables coming from the solar panels go into and then leave and then connect into the inverter. But if you don't have one of these, and you're following the black cables coming from your solar panels to your inverter, and there is not one of these in between, then most likely your installer is utilizing the built-in DC isolation function, which is this knob here. The box is mounted on the wall facing you, looking at the screen. It's in the left-hand corner. You'll feel it, and you'll be able to turn it to disengage. Okay, so once you've isolated the DC, the solar is now inert. Great. Now we need to isolate the AC, or the alternating current, and that's the current that's coming from the grid going into your hybrid or your AC coupled inverter. Normally, again, you'll see installers will fit one of these. It's an AC isolator, normally yellow. The whole box sometimes is yellow. Yellow with a red turn handle is pretty normal. You'll want to turn that to the off position. It will make quite a clunk when it changes. And if you don't have one of these, although again, you should have one, it should be near your inverter, easily accessible. If you don't have one of these, you will probably find in your consumer unit or fuse board or switchboard, whatever you wish to call it, distribution board, they're all the same thing. You should have a marked circuit that says solar on it. You'll want to flip that switch to the off position, and that will isolate the solar as well. If you've got this installed in a meter box outside, you'll notice that in your meter box you'll have something that looks like this. It's exactly the same process, should be all marked up and labeled. You'll want to turn the small unit off first and then the master switch and isolate that. It should be all labeled up. It will have a big black cable going in the top of it and a big black cable leaving it, and that will be the AC, the alternating current that is powering up this unit. So look in your meter box for one of these. Sometimes you have to lift a lid to see it. You should not need to open them with a screwdriver. Don't try and open them. It should be easily accessible just by lifting a flap and then isolating it. Same for your consumer unit. Have a look where all your fuses are. You should have a nice clearly marked solar or solar PV label with one of those circuits. Again, it is a requirement that it's installed if it's installed onto an MCB or an RCBO, a circuit breaker switch, that it is clearly labeled. Your installer should point out how to isolate the AC. This is how to do it. Okay, so let's just run through what we've done again. We've isolated DC either via the DC isolator or via the switch on the bottom of the inverter. We've isolated the AC either by turning the AC off or breaking the circuit breaker that you have in your fuse box or in a box inside the meter box. You'll notice that the screen of your inverter is probably still on. Well, how can that be? I've turned the AC off, I turned the DC off. What else is powering this? Well, if you have batteries, your battery system will still be powering the inverter. So what you'll want to do is look at the very top unit that the cables connect to from your inverter to the batteries. This top unit is the brains of the battery management system, and that's what it's called, ABMS. You'll want to, and if I annotate, you'll want to turn off the button labeled power, and you'll notice that it's recessed slightly. Push that in and release, and you'll hear a clonk, and all of these lights will go out here. Then you'll want to turn this isolator, the circuit breaker, off. I think it goes from right to left for off. It will be obvious which way because it will be the opposite of what it's on now. And then after a few seconds, you will notice that the screen of the inverter will go blank. The screen, and when it's blank, it will also reset some error codes as well. So that's normally the first step of troubleshooting anything, is to go DC, get rid of my pencil, go to DC, here, then AC, one of these options, and then go to the BMS, hit the silver button on the left, and then push the circuit breaker across. It doesn't need to be off for very long. 2 minutes is probably excessive, but that will be fine. 1 to 2 minutes, not a problem. And then you're going to turn it all back on in the opposite, in the reverse order. So flick the circuit breaker across, start doing some drawing, switch the circuit breaker on, push this button. You'll notice the button stays in recessed, and you'll see a little edge to the button once it's pushed in. That activates the batteries. These lights start flashing away. Then you will want to then turn back on any AC circuit breakers that you've turned off, whether it's the box in the meter box, whether it's the consumer unit under the stairs, whether it's the isolator that's near your inverter. Energize the AC system again. You'll notice the screen of the inverter will wake up. Then, as quickly as you can, but there's no immediate rush and it's not going to break anything if you do take a little bit of time to do, but as soon as you can, you'll want to activate your DC. So switch the switch on the inverter. If it's on the inverter, you'll hear a click, and then it will return back to its sort of default position. You'll feel the spring. You'll click it. You've got to push it all the way till it clicks, and then release it. And then you'll notice that the DC is then working. The solar. If you've isolated it here and you've not done it on the inverter, just turn the switch back to on. You'll hear a clonk. Don't be timid. You've got to turn these isolators with some force, and you've got to do it quickly so that it makes a good contact. And then you'll notice that the inverter screen will go into a self-check mode. It's then going to start to count down from either 60 or 30 seconds. You'll hear some clicking as various relays try to fire back up. Take note of any error messages after a few minutes when it's all stabilized. If there's any errors remaining, grab a picture of it, upload it onto the community, and we can try and troubleshoot it for you. Your first port of call for any issues with your solar system is your installer first. If you're worried about the safety of the system, just isolate the AC as early as you can. If the AC has been turned off, so that is one of these, or the trip switches in any of these fashions, if anything is wrong with the inverter, just turn the AC off. And what that does is it will actually de-energize the DC as well. It will cut all of the system eventually. It's not the best way. You should always isolate the DC first. But if there is a fault, you'll want to isolate the AC first. If you're just resetting it out of course, then do as I've described. Go through AC to DC, and then to the BMS to cut the power. But the inverter goes into a sort of standby mode when you turn the AC off, which is useful if you need to turn it off quickly. That's probably everything you need to know. I'll upload this video onto the community. Feel free to comment, ask any questions, and try and pump out as many of these sort of how-to tips and tricks videos as I can. Bye for now.